What's going on, you guys? Welcome to the Unlock Your Freedom podcast with Kevin Kepple. If you're looking to create more in your life, and if you want more of anything, it's not about doing more, it's about being more. So I'm excited you're here, and I'll see you guys on the inside.
I know you got a really cool company, Delta Fit, that serves people who are looking to be better versions of them, said very simply. But I'd love to know the why behind it. How did you decide this is how you wanted to serve, and where's the vision come from?
So Kevin, that's a good question, man. It started from actually me going through my own struggles, trials, and tribulations. I prior military officer, and coming out of the military, I was struggling with PTSD. I had gotten a divorce about 2 years before I got out of the military, and that caused a lot of anxiety and depression in me as well. It compounded with the PTSD, to be honest. And so, man, I didn't want to be alone. I was dependent on people. I was dependent on my ex-wife, my kids. Now they're gone. And so I sought for my own, what I felt would be the solution for me, because I didn't want to be alone. I was so afraid of that, was to start dating. And it was like serial dating, yeah. Like I was never alone, and as soon as I was with somebody, I attached very quickly. I was just like, you and me, we're doing this, let's go. And we'd be dating for 6 months, 12 months, a year, 18 months, and as soon as we broke up, I was in another relationship within 24 to 48 hours, because I just did not want to be alone. It was that caused more fear in me than being with somebody that I knew was not compatible with me. Because there was times I was with people, I was just like, this is not going to work out. And I was unhappy being in a relationship, but I was like, but being alone scared me even more.
Man,
right?
I want to ask you a question about that. I'm so sorry to jump in, but man, that sounded like me talking to myself there, because basically that was me in my 20s. I'm like, I just was so unhappy internally, but I felt like if I was with somebody else, then at least something wasn't that wrong with me, because somebody would be with me. And then if I wasn't alone, I didn't have to face these things that I was afraid of. And it was such a counterproductive way to move through the world, because I would lean so heavy on the person in the relationship that there was no room for independence. And I feel like that's so crucial. So, man, that's really powerful. Thanks for sharing that. I'd love to hear the rest of that explanation.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm glad you said that, and you jumped in and you let me know that was something that's similar that you fought with. And that's the reason why I started Delta Fit, because I realized that I was not alone. I was not alone. And here's why, is because all of us, if you boil down to the bare essence of why people are afraid, there's two main fears. It's fear of being worthy, being enough, right? And ultimately what it boils down to is the most important fear, what we all need, is love. It's fear of being loved, of not being loved, right? And so, and you can boil down the fear of being worthy, being enough, to almost anything. Like, people don't go towards their dreams, their goals, like starting that business or whatever, because they're afraid of failing. They're afraid that they're not good enough. They're not worthy of attaining that, right? They don't go to the gym, they eat whatever. They think they're not good enough to attain that body. My genetics, this, that, the other, I'm big bone, yeah. whatever ideas or constructs that they've developed from their past experiences, from discussions that they've had or conversations they had with their parents, with their teachers, with their friends, whatever. It all comes down to this construct that we've built, and a fear that we have, and it's fear of being worthy or enough, and fear of not being loved, right? And that was me, right? And so how I combated it, I got to a point where I had so many bad relationships that it was like a stock market tanking, right? So it'd be like, I'd start to crash down, and then I'd be with someone and go up a little bit, but then it would go bad and start to crash down some more. And it took me down to what I felt was the lowest point of my life, which I became so suicidal that at one point I put a gun to my head. Luckily, I did not have the courage to pull the trigger. But leading up to that, I had thoughts of suicide that I was struggling with for so long. It was like I couldn't fight the thought of it. It was every single day. And after the last relationship that I had, where it was back to back from my divorce in 2015, it was at the end of 2020. So for like a 5-year period, I was serial dating like this. And the relationship that ended in 2020, my buddy was like, and there's always stuff, you tell your friends what happened. And it's like, man, she did this or whatever. Or like, he did this. And like, oh man, he's such an asshole. And like my buddy's like, dude, she is fucking crazy, man. So I don't know if I can curse. I'm sorry.
There's no rules here, man. Just get
no rules. Okay, good.
Yeah.
So he's like, dude, she's fucking crazy. And he was like, dude, how do you keep finding all these crazy women? And him asking me that, it sparked something within me that got me to really start to think maybe I'm the problem. Because he's right. All these relationships ended horrifically, like dumpster fire. I could write a book. You ever read the book or have seen the movie How Hope They Serve Beer in Hell?
Yeah.
Tucker Max.
Yeah,
he wrote a book.
Yeah.
I have stories that are similar, that are insane.
Yeah.
And it was just all this crazy experiences that I had. But honestly, I was just being a shitty person. And I was trying to attach myself to the wrong people, right? Out of desperation, out of need, out of wanting to feel enough, wanting to be enough, right? And be loved. And what I decided to do in 2021 was I'm going to stop dating and I'm going to be alone. I'm going to sit in my thoughts and I'm going to fucking suffer, right? Because this is the problem I have. And through that suffering, I started to find positive ways that I could overcome and actually grow as a person. And it was just simple disciplines. It was working out, eating right, removing alcohol, reading daily, all these things that I did. And I just said, I'm going to do them consistently. And I'm going to stack this discipline day after day after day after day. That's going to build momentum in my life. And what that did was it built confidence. And through that confidence, I started to find that worthiness comes from within. Love comes from within. It doesn't come from externally. All the love that we need is within us. And no one can tell me that I'm worthy. Because this happens all the time. Oh, you're good enough. You should do this. You should do that. Blah, blah, blah. And then the person's still unhappy. Why is it? Because they don't believe it themselves. Because the worthiness, you being enough, comes from within you. It does not come externally. And that's what I discovered. And I had such a massive transformation that people started reaching out to me and they're like, dude, you're a different person. Like there's something like I was higher vibrational. I was just putting off different energy and people noticed it. And the more I shared my story, because I didn't want to share those things, I was ashamed. Yeah. I was ashamed that I had thoughts of suicide. I was ashamed that I was doing these things and this serial dating and treating women the way I was treating them. And when I took accountability for it and I took responsibility for everything that had happened and realized that everything that's happened in my life is due to the decisions that I've made, not due to anyone else, but it's due to the decisions that I made. I started seeing things in a different light, and that shame and that guilt went away because I forgave myself. And so I started telling people and sharing my story similar to that. And just like you came in and said, dude, I feel like you're talking just like how I was. I started realizing there's a lot of people that were suffering with the same shit. And it was funny is that it's like being in a prison in your own mind, right? You're stuck there. You're unhappy. You're basically locked up. And what you don't realize is that you have the key. You spend so much time in that prison that you really recognize what it's like to be in that prison, that once you get out, that I can see when somebody's in that prison. I can tell by the words they use. I can tell by the language the excuses they make. I can tell by their physical body. I can tell there's a lot of things that show their physiology, their energy. And you start to realize there's a lot of people suffering. There's a lot of people that need help, and they need help to find that inner confidence and that self-worth within. And so I started to help people onesies and twosies. It just happened organically by people reaching out to me and asking me for help. And I did. And it got to a point where I felt very fulfilled. Like, this was my passion. This is what I was meant to do, is to help people to get through these challenges and trials and tribulations like I had been through. And I use fitness as a way. It's really the gateway. It's really just a way to introduce a little bit of suffering on the front end in order to grow yourself. It's very I don't know if you do any research on Marcus Aurelius or
Sure,
like
absolutely.
Stoicism.
Yeah.
So it's like the obstacle is the way, right? And like what Marcus Aurelius says, and what it is like, if by putting a little bit of difficulty into your life, what you're doing is you're strengthening your mind, you're strengthening yourself, your soul, your very essence, and saying that I can accomplish difficult things, right? Just as simple as going to the gym when I don't want to go, when my muscles are sore, or I'm tired, or I make all the excuses in the world because I want to sleep in, whatever it may be. By doing that, I'm strengthening my mind and my spirit to say, I can do challenges. And the more you do it, the stronger it becomes, so that when other challenges come, which challenges are going to come in life, challenges, tribulations, obstacles, whatever, it's going to happen. Are you going to crumble because that challenge happened, or are you going to be able to take it in stride, find the solution, and move forward, right? And the more I help people, the more I gain a passion for it. And eventually this year I said, you know what, I want to do this at a wide range. I want to try to help as many people as possible. And so that's how I started Delta Fit. Long story short.
Yeah, powerful stuff, man. And I love what you were ending with. It's like, like I love doing hard things because I proved to myself I can do hard things. And, that's like how I do anything is pretty much how I do everything. And so if I'm doing hard things, in the morning at the gym or whatever, then, when I get this creative block or whatever, creativity is risky. It's dangerous. There's a lot of fear around being creative. It's easy to, be like everybody else. But like, if I want to be above average, like I have to treat myself above average. And if I'm trying to be like everybody else, that's average by definition. And it's so important that we figure out what being aligned with like the best of us is, because that's love. We're all created out of this love. And that's like where this happiness and long-term energy comes from. And man, fitness is so crucial because, one, you feel better. If I feel better, I perform better. And also I prove to myself that I can do hard things every time I go work out. And it's so beneficial. And I know part of what you do is helping people overcome limiting beliefs, obviously, because that's pretty much weaved through everything you said. And I think if people could just master that one skill, identifying and eliminating limiting beliefs, like the world would dramatically level up, right? And our personal lives would level up. And so how do you help people identify their limiting beliefs? And then how do you help them move through those beliefs that they have? Because whatever I believe is true is what I'm going to serve, right? That creates my results.
Yeah. So I believe that the first awareness, right? The awareness and the knowledge of it. Okay. So there's a great book that talks about limiting beliefs that breaks it down into like how your beliefs are like rules that you live by. And or agreements you've made with yourself. And if you really analyze it, if you really were to sit and search within yourself and think back, how did I even come to this belief? You'd realize that all your beliefs were not organic, original thoughts. They were given to you by somebody else. Right. And so the book is called The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. Great book. Really great book. And he talks about all these different beliefs and how they're basically a prison. And all you need to do is you need to basically identify each of these, let go of them, but you have to replace them with a new belief. You can't just have a void there. And he gives 4 original beliefs that are, and agreements that you can make, that you can believe in, that are all positive, right? That help to promote a more healthier life in order to get out of that prison within your own mind, right? And so that's the first thing is really just getting the awareness. So another way we can get awareness is to understand, how does our mind work, right? Like our brains are powerful. Like they're the most powerful supercomputer on the planet. There's not a computer that exists that has the computing power of every single individual person's brain, right? And so everyone has access and capability to use it. And if you actually do the study of the brain, there's 4 sections of the brain that operate, and they're actually biologically, there are different sections within the brain, right? And each section has a different function. So you have the rational brain, or the logical brain that allows us to speak. It allows us to like memorize facts, figures, data, information. It pulls in information. Even if you don't realize it's doing it, right? And it just works, right? There's the emotional side of the brain, right? The emotional side, controls all your emotions, right? Anytime you're sad, happy, or even keel, like that's all due to your emotional side. Now, these are both linked to each other, because how you anticipate or perceive the external world is going to also depend on how you react to it, your emotions and how you react. So the next two are why people stay where they are or have these limiting beliefs. The first is what everyone knows is like the fight or flight. Okay. And it's in the back. It's like the back stem of the brain. And what it's doing is it's constantly searching the world for dangers. Okay. And when it finds that danger, its sole purpose what the brain does is it allocates all resources to that section of the brain in order to find a solution out of there. So it basically makes you very tunnel vision, right? And it's like, hey, let's back up the clock to prehistoric times. You're in a cave and a tiger comes out. You're not thinking about the weather. You're not thinking about what you got to have for dinner that night, right? Your brain's sole purpose at that point is to either get away or kill the thing that is a danger to you, right? And that's all it's going to do, right? So what happens is that when we are in a fear state, and you talked about fear and creativity, which is key right here. When we're in a fear state, that activates that same part of the brain. So if you're constantly in fear of something, if you're afraid that you're not going to make enough money this month to make bills, if you're afraid of going and doing a presentation at work, if you're afraid to talk to that person, that person that you are attracted to, or whatever it may be, what you're doing is it ignites your fight or flight, right? And it makes you very tunnel vision. So you don't see the world as you're supposed to. You only see either how do I make this happen, or how do I get out of here? How do I protect myself? And our brain's pure function is to keep us alive as long as possible, like to have a sustained life as long as possible. When you get out of the fear state, the fourth piece of the brain is the creative portion of the brain. And the creative portion of the brain is like when you are constantly, or you can be in a constant flow state. This is when like ideas start to come to you a lot easier. If you've ever had a time where like things just seem to line up and it doesn't make sense why, like success just found you, right? Like that client just came out of nowhere and called you and you just was like, you needed it. You didn't even know you needed it. And you're like, wow, you get that introduction that you never even thought was a potential possibility in order to get you on said podcast, like Here I Am Here, or on a stage or whatever. That has to do with your creative brain. Okay. And your creative brain is how we're supposed to be as humans. That's when we are closest to our highest self. That's when we have access to infinite intelligence. Right. And I do believe that we're all connected in some way, shape, or form. You ever like thought about somebody a lot and then they call you and then they're like, hey man, I was thinking about you. And you're just like, that's fucking weird. Like I was thinking about you too. I think we're all connected, right?
That's quantum entanglement. I mean, that's proven.
Yeah, exactly. And that's when you have two individuals that are operating the same wavelength. They're on both on the creative side of their brain, and they're literally connected, right? That's that infinite intelligence. So it's like, how do we get into that infinite intelligence? Well, first we have to understand how our brains work, like I just described. But secondly, we got to get rid of that fear. Okay. So I was constantly in fear of being alone and not being loved. Right. Which caused me to, and also I was afraid of work because I was an entrepreneur. I started off in insurance when I got out of the military, and I'm trying to make enough money to survive. Right. And I had success, but my success was like this constantly. It wasn't until I started to let go of things and basically take myself off the hook when it came to the fear, be okay with being alone, not see it as something that was bad, but something that I could deeper understand about myself, build myself up in confidence, that those challenges, I no longer feared the challenges because I actually reveled in them. Because the more harder stuff I did, the more I realized I was getting better. And the better I got, the more I wanted to push myself to see how far I could go. Right. And that's potential. Potential is always out of reach. It always is. No matter how much you push yourself, what you're doing is it's like stretching a rubber band or stretching a balloon or blowing it up, right? You keep blowing it up, you blow up as far as you can. Well, when it goes back down and let the air out, it's not the same size it was before because it's been stretched out. And then you can stretch it, you blow it up again, you can stretch it out a little bit farther and then a little bit farther. And that's how our potential is. Like you can perform so far, you can almost like reach your potential and then you kind of snap back. And what happens is your potential gets pushed out even further because you just hit a new level, right? As you're doing this, it builds this confidence within you where the fear is no longer there. It's not that I'm not afraid of things, but I'm more consciously aware of my emotions and more consciously aware of the negativity that comes from those and what state that puts me in, right? Everything has to do with our physical state. Like if I could tell you, and this is for anybody listening, if you could be in a state where you're constantly in a flow state and you're just on it and like you get to work and next thing you know, like a work's done and you've like knocked out all this stuff and it's like time just flew by and you enjoyed the process and you were like that every single day, everyone would be like, yeah, I'd love to do that, and be super productive, be top of your game. Right. Well, that has everything to do with your emotional state, everything to do with your physiology, with how you present yourself in the world, with your emotional state and controlling those things. And what you realize is that the more you focus on these small little tiny habits of like being in a physical presence, like sitting up straight, sticking your chest out. Really hard to be depressed when you're like this. It's nearly impossible. Your physiology controls your emotions, right? If you notice, like when you're sad, you're probably going to be like this, head down, stuff like that, right? And I've done this with people where I've done practical exercises with my clients where it's like, hey, think of something that makes you really unhappy, really sad, and like get your body in that position. And they do. And then I'm like, hey, stay in that mindset, stay upset, but I want you to stick your chest out. I want you to sit up straight, stick your chest out, lift your head up, but I want you to still keep thinking about it, still be upset. Right. And they can't. It's nearly impossible. And then they start laughing. And then they're like, I can't do it. Exactly. Because your physiology controls so much. And so teaching them how your brain works, the different pieces, and how to get out of that fight or flight, because you're not going to be able to be as effective if you're in that fight or flight mode. If you're stressed, upset, worried, fearful, anything like that, all those negative emotions, what it does is it causes a strain on your brain, and your brain starts to allocate resources to take that away, right? Tunnel vision, it's like looking through a keyhole versus seeing the whole world. Okay. And there's a lot of things that you can do to get yourself out of it. I like to use physical fitness. I like to use physiology, and really like reading and building good habits, disciplined habits. Right. But people can do it by changing scenery, like go on a trip. And when I say go on a trip, I don't mean like go to Cancun and go sit at a resort. I mean like go to another country you've never been and live among the locals and experience what it's like to have to open your mind to communicate with people that you don't know the language. Yeah. Start to use your mind in different ways. And what's going to happen is you're going to start using this creative part of your brain, and you're going to, I'm telling you, it opens up all kinds of crazy possibilities. Success starts finding you. You don't even realize why. Things start happening that are like more positive, and you're accessing your infinite intelligence. So.
Yeah, wow, that's good stuff, man. I love all of that. And, I think being in flow, one of the best things about flow is we get that kind of transient hypofrontality where that prefrontal cortex goes away, and that's where the inner critic lives. And that's really good when you can shut down the inner critic. That's when the really cool stuff starts flowing through. And I know what you're talking about. It's like, man, like I wrote this thing, but like I don't know where that came from. Like I've never thought that thought, and it's magic. Oh, it's so good. All right, man, I know you got lots to do, so let's bring this thing in for a landing. I got a couple more questions, and we're on our way. So What does freedom mean to you on the Unlock Your Freedom podcast here?
Freedom means to me having control of your thoughts. There's 4 things that we can control in our life, right? Our thoughts, our feelings, our actions, and our speech. Our action and our speech are really predominantly going to be controlled by our thoughts, though.
Absolutely.
By our thoughts. So like that's the initial. And our feelings are going to be controlled by our thoughts. Having a certainty in yourself and controlling your thoughts, this is the one thing that nobody can take from you, right? However, too often, we as people will get into a situation or something will happen to us in the external world. A friend upsets us, or somebody blocks us on Facebook, or someone flips us off in the store or whatever. And then our thoughts start going wild about that situation. And we just can't let it go, right? What we've done is we've allowed somebody else to take up space in our mind. It's like David Goggins says, like someone this like literally stole our soul, and they have rent. They're rent free up in there, right? You have complete control of what you think about, right? And what you focus on, because what you focus on is what's going to be brought to you in your world. So freedom is understanding the power of thought and literally controlling it. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's not like listening to this and be like, okay, I'm going to control my thought. No, this is something that has to take awareness. And sometimes you'll lose it. I still lose it every once in a while. For instance, I was just traveling. I just came back from Tampa. I went to go visit my kids in Tampa for over Thanksgiving, and that all the way till the end of the month. And I'm in the airport, in Tampa airport, coming back. And this guy, I was going through security. I'm TSA pre-check, I'm going through security, and I walked through and they said, hey, you got to go back through, because my arm bumped it and it went off. They're like, hey, go back through. So I'm literally backing up, and some guy tried to go in right behind me, and he was speeding through, wasn't paying attention. And I barely bumped into him. And I bumped into him and I said, oh, I'm sorry. He was like, what are you doing? Watch out. And I was like, hey, he told me to back up and go back through. And he was like, whatever. And then I was like, I didn't even think about it. And then under his breath, he was like, fucking shithead. And this is an old dude, right? And I'm a big guy. I'm 6'7". I'm like 240 pounds. Like, I'm muscular. I'm a big guy. No one's going to call me a fucking shithead in person. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is, and so I turned around and said, I was like, excuse me, what did you say, sir? And I just looked him in his eyes. I was like, is there a problem? And he would like looked at me, and he was like, no. I said, okay. And I turned around and I walked right out. And I started thinking about it, and I was like, man, that guy's fucking, like, he has to be miserable. He has to be miserable, like, to act like that. And with a stranger in public, I didn't do anything mean to him. I was just following directions. And if anything, he shouldn't have been so close to me, right? He should have waited until I was all the way through, and the next person said, hey, you come through next. And then he goes through the metal detector, right? That's what should have happened, but didn't. And I found myself thinking about this for the next couple minutes. And then finally I was like, why the fuck am I thinking about this? And I caught myself in the middle of it. I was like, I don't got time to waste on this. And I just cut it from my mind, and I became aware of it. I started thinking about what I wanted to think about, right? So there's always kinds of times where the external world will happen. Situations, circumstances will take place, and it takes up our thoughts. When you become aware that you're thinking about it too much, that's when you're like, okay, I need to stop this. And you start thinking about other things, right? The more you do this, the more you practice it, that awareness will come quicker and quicker and quicker, to where you're not going to spend an entire day thinking about some situation that happened. You'll spend maybe 20, 30 minutes or even 5 minutes. Like, I was thinking about the guy for like 2 minutes, and I was like, I'm thinking about this too much, right? And that's true freedom, is having control of your thoughts, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the good news is we don't have to believe everything we think, right? Sometimes it's just a thought, and we're way bigger than the thoughts in our head. We're, that space that the thoughts take place in. Yeah, but I'm not just these thoughts, and it took me a long time to understand that. So that's really powerful advice. All right, you touched on a good book earlier, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. What's another book you'd love to read, recommend, or give away?
Oh, the book I've been recommending to everybody ever since I read it recently, probably about 4 or 5 months ago, is Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill.
Is that the one where he's having the conversations with the devil? It's like an interview with the devil, and it's like
it's an interview with the devil. Yeah. It is. I'm telling you, it's mind blowing. It is a fucking mind blowing.
Did you listen to that on? Like,
I listened to it. I've listened to the audiobook probably 6 times.
Devil's voice is entertaining, if nothing else, too. He's like, hey. And, but like the word that I loved out of that book was drifting. He's like, that's what the devil wants us to do, is just drift. And like, that's, the opposite of alignment and connection. And it's such a good book. Great recommendation.
And really what the devil says to combat The number one way he beats people is through fear, which we've discussed. That's how he actually traps people into sin, into drifting.
Yeah.
Is through fear. And he says the only way to beat it is by having control of your thoughts.
Yeah.
Is literally by having a certainty of like, this is what I want to do in life, having an objective and having control of your thoughts to get there.
God, that's a great recommendation.
But too many people give up that. And that's what causes drifting in life. That's what causes falling into vices, into, the overconsumption of media, of food, of pornography, of sex, of drugs, of alcohol, whatever. All these things are caused by drifting, and drifting, the number one way to get people to drift is through fear.
Yeah. Such a good book.
Yeah.
All right. Last question. Where can people go to learn more about you and connect with you?
Yeah. So best place to follow me is on Instagram. I'm Gregory A. Birch, BIRCH, like the tree, _ Gregory A. Birch _ hit me up if you ever see anything. If you have any questions, feel free. If you listen to this, you're like, oh man, I listen to the podcast. Send me a message. I always reply to everybody. And if you want to check out more about Delta Fit, just go to deltafitlife.com. And the website's got a lot of information and videos and reviews and all kinds of stuff about what I do and how I help people.
Yeah, very cool, man. Go check out Greg, and he's doing good work, and he's got a great message and a great way to serve. So thanks for coming on and sharing with us, man. I appreciate your time.
Kevin, I appreciate you having me on, brother.
Yeah, my pleasure. All right. Bye, everybody.
Alrighty, you guys. Thanks for making it through to the end of the Unlock Your Freedom podcast with us. Really grateful to have amazing listeners like you. Thank you guys again for listening. We love you, and we'll see you next time inside the Unlock Your Freedom podcast with Kevin Kepple.